on today's show.
Yeah, having the book, even before I published it, just putting author pending. I think what I would put is it was in 2015. I'd put author, and then I'd do parentheses 2019. I just put it so far out that people would probably forget at that point. It opened so many more doors because I would get accepted to things. When I would apply to things, once I would have author on, I would get accepted to things. I'd get invited to conferences. People would answer my cold emails. Whereas before, when I would just say, hey, I'm a college student, or hey, I'm a gap year, or a high school student, no one would even answer my cold emails. So the authority that the book gave me to open doors and be treated as a legitimate person, a legitimate entrepreneur, was unparalleled.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Creator Institute podcast. Your host, Koester.
How's it going, everyone? This is Eric, and on today's episode, we're going to answer the question, what do you do when you finally get into your dream school? And in the case of Justin Lafazan, he decided to take a gap year and said, yeah, I just got into Wharton, but screw it. I need a year to figure out my life. And Justin goes on this incredible quest during this gap year, not to go travel, not to go sort of study and sort of live and enjoy and party, but instead he basically goes out to figure out what his calling should be. He had sort of this life crisis at 17, decided to use that time to figure it out. And he went on to write a book that became a bestseller. And that book helped inspire him to start his company that he's running today called NextGen Summit. The book, What Wakes You Up, really is this sort of moment in time where he says, I needed to find out what I needed to be doing. And today, Justin is working with tens of thousands of young entrepreneurs in college to help them inspire their own adventures and journeys. And I think what's so powerful about Justin's story is he talks a lot about how he used his book and the process of this book, and ultimately the process of creating NextGen, which is a conference that's become a community. He used that process to network his way into places that surprised even him. And you'll hear some of the stories of the incredible people he met as a 17-year-old who was navigating his way into conferences he shouldn't be at, and some of the hacks that he used to get there. But what I love about it is there is no age limit on when you can be an expert, when you can create credibility. And Justin shares some really interesting stories. He's still a college student, still working on his company, and has these aspirations to really create a huge dynamic community of the millions of potential, entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs who are in college and just out of it, trying to find their own way. Justin is someone who I've had the pleasure to get to know, and I think you'll enjoy hearing from him today. So Justin from NextGen Summit and the best-selling author of What Wakes You Up. Awesome. So excited here to be with my man Justin today. And Justin, what's really fun about this for me is you and I have known each other for almost a year now. And what's interesting is I get the excuse to sort of cyber stalk people and learn a bunch about everyone. So it's been fun for me to kind of dig a little deeper, and I was like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know all these things. So I think this is really fun. I'm excited to chat with you today and hear a little bit about your adventures.
Yeah, Eric. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been so great kind of having you as an advisor, a partner, an editorial inspiree. And I'm just really stoked to hopefully share some insight.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to start with kind of an interesting part of your adventure, and that was your kind of your unusual approach to a gap year. I think that I've read some that some experts have said you basically go to a gap year. You take a gap year if you don't know what you want to do with yourself, or you just want to go out and party. And you took a decidedly different approach to a gap year. So I want to tell me about the origin story of your decision to take a gap year, and then we'll dive into some of the specifics of what you did in it. But I want to hear this. You're admitted to an Ivy League premier school, and here's you, this crazy guy, saying, "Hey, I'm going to take a gap year." Tell me about your mindset at the time when you decided I'm going to take a gap year.
Yeah, it's so funny because I remember the day after I got into Wharton, I wanted to do it at Penn really my whole life. I only applied to one school. I was so dead set on going to where I'm at now. So the day after I got in, I come back into high school. I'm wearing a T-shirt. Everyone's like, really excited for me. and everyone's saying, oh, are you going to start looking for roommates, or oh, are you going to start researching what classes are you going to take, blah blah blah. And I actually said, oh, actually, I'm not going right away. I'm taking a gap year. And it was almost a look of horror on people's faces, for close friends, horror on their faces that I wasn't going to go right away. And it's because months before I had even applied, actually, I had decided that I'm going to need to take time off. Mm-hmm. It was the summer after my junior year of high school. I kind of joked that I had a quarter life crisis.
At 17 years old, no less, right?
Years old. I mean, I think we're going to live to 200, but separate point.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. So I think that I was going down a path that a lot of, I think, really talented folks my age were really set on, which was a finance, management consulting, investment banking route. I was, it's pretty crazy that I was pretty, dead set on that. But I was going down that path, and then I watched a couple of TED Talks this summer after my junior year that really just woke me up to the concept that most Americans are really disengaged at work and outright unhappy at work. And I didn't know what it was, but there was something calling me to explore that. So I was both more confused, but more aligned and focused than I had ever been before. And I know I needed to really clarify those feelings and explore that part of the world. I needed to explore what it meant to be happy at work. I was a great student. I was getting great grades, doing amazing extracurriculars, but was I really loving the work that I was doing? I'm not sure many students, fortunately, get to say that. So I needed to explore it. So I decided right then and there that I needed some time, and that was going to be the way to do it. I went to my parents. It took them a little bit, but they came after some explaining. And then I was dead set on it. So I went into the application process, had already decided that I needed to clarify some ambitions, some goals, and the rest I say is history.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, and I think it's you're in some ways, people don't reflect on where they are in life. And I think, whether or not you sort of knew it at the time, you probably were approaching your own life and career very entrepreneurially at that point, even if you didn't quite exactly know what that all meant.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that a lot of the times people don't reflect because it's pretty hard, and you might not love what you see in the mirror. And people love to put up smoke, or I think lie about really where they're at. And it was one of the most honest and pretty painful times of my life where I was taking a big step back and saying, all right, this is what I've dedicated my life to being. What if I was wrong?
Right.
What if I made that decision too quickly? And what if this is not the outcome that I was so looking for?
Yeah. So then let's talk about your gap year. You decide to take this year. Had you, in some ways, you said it was sort of an opportunity to discover and explore. I was reading an article that was written about you in USA Today, and it sort of describes you were just unhappy and didn't quite have a plan together yet. Tell me about your kind of what you decided to accomplish and do with your gap year.
Eric, it's funny that we were joking about Southeast Asia before the call, because I think I submitted an official plan to the Wharton School that I was going to travel Southeast Asia during my gap year. That was because it sounded like a really good thing to do during a gap year. I had no idea what I was going to do. So I just told them that I was going to do that.
And in full disclosure, you've not yet been to, that was 5 years ago. It's still not been.
I have never stepped foot on the continent. But yeah, I had zero clue what I was going to do. At first, it was just this calling of need to explore, need to figure things out, need to try certain things. As the gap year got closer, as my senior year of high school wrapped up, I had started a company in high school. So I started asking some folks who I was touching in my world, what would you recommend? How would you recommend getting immersed in entrepreneurship? How would you recommend getting a flavor for what this field is like? And everyone told me different advice, but really the common thread was go to conferences and talk to people. And those two seemingly simple pieces of advice launched a full year of exploration, because that's really all I did for 365 days. I went to conferences and I tried to talk to people. And that was the start of my book as well. The start of that entire project is I just needed to get my hands on more entrepreneurial leaders who had for themselves figured out their why and chased it with everything they got.
It's amazing. And tell me what was the most kind of interesting adventure you had?
I did some random work when I was on my gap year. And I at the beginning of the gap year, decided I was going to say yes to opportunities. So whatever the opportunity was, if it sounded interesting, if I could learn something, I would say yes to it. So that took me from doing the original business that I was starting in high school, which was college admissions advising, to marketing consulting for some of the world's most inspirational speakers, spending times in the circles of folks like Les Brown, a lot of folks like the Think and Grow Rich community, Craig Reed, David Corbin, some really amazing people. So I was doing speaking and marketing consulting on personal development, self-help books for really exclusive masterminds and conferences, and those were unbelievable because I was in a room of 200 folks who were paying tens of thousands of dollars to attend these really exclusive masterminds with these self-help gurus, and I was this like 17-year-old overweight kid with a badge and a too long button-down shirt, kind of waiting in the corner, just looking and trying to figure out how do I fit in. But I was just saying yes to opportunities. And I think that was the best thing I could have done. I did so many different things in my gap year, and I hated most of them, or I didn't, fit with most of them. But how would you know until you try? And
right.
no one really tries.
Do you always think that you were going to, at one point, switch into the normal gap year, sort of have that experience where it's like, oh gosh, now I'm going to go to Southeast Asia? Was it always kind of on the horizon, or did that sort of go out the door as you started to really uncover who you wanted to be?
Yeah, I think I started to have a little bit of a plan about halfway through the year. And that was because I had stumbled across a new market opportunity for the company that I run now, NextGen. But before that, I never had a plan. I never really had a vision. I couldn't even imagine what the gap year would end like or what the transition to school would be like after that. I had really just wanting to explore, wanted to dive into things. So I had no idea. And until there was like a strong force of, maybe this company could be something, or maybe this would be cool. I was just waking up every day, trying to go to a different city and trying to talk to more people.
That's awesome. So you, I want to talk a little bit more about NextGen, because I think it's a pretty amazing story as well, how you started a sort of company with such international reach. But before that, I want to talk about something you hinted at, which is a book. Here's you on your gap year, and you decide that you're going to write and publish a book. What was that? What was the mindset that decided this was the thing you had to do as part of your gap year?
Yeah, so I take it back to a breakfast I had in my senior year of high school. When I was starting my first company, I took out to breakfast a local entrepreneur in my town, and I asked him, what advice do you have for connecting to really high level people? He had recently connected with Mark Ruffalo, and they were, forging a really great relationship, and I was really fascinated by that. So I said, how did you do this? And he said, oh, it's pretty easy when you have a book, because you can just go and say, hey, I'd love to interview for this book. So I was like, wow, that's maybe the easiest cheat code I've ever heard in my life. So I didn't have a book. I had no plans of writing a book, but I started telling people that I was interviewing, hey, I'm writing this book. Can I interview for it? So I'd email. I truly printed out the Forbes 30 under 30 list at the start of my gap year and emailed every single winner of the 2014 class in all the categories. And I said, hey, my name is Justin. I'm a 17 or 18-year-old, taking a gap year. But I'm going to Wharton after. I'm writing this book on inspiration and entrepreneurship and all these different topics. Can I interview you for it? And I had no plans to actually write the book, but I just wanted to I wanted to talk to these people. So I would hop on an hour-long call. I'd use Zencaster. I'd record on my phone, whatever it may be, and I'd ask these amazing young entrepreneurs, hey, how did you start this company? What was your why? What were mistakes you made? And I was just talking. I was spending hours of the day just talking to these entrepreneurs. And I'd have pages and pages and pages of notes and transcripts. And all of a sudden, it starts to really look like something. And it started to show me so much. And those initial relationships introduced me to NextGen's first speakers and mentors and advisors and some of the greatest millennial entrepreneurs in the world. And it was all because I honestly lied and said that I was writing this book. I ended up did writing in the end, which is kind of so funny how the world works. But I used the book as a tool to connect with the brightest young people worldwide. I didn't know why I was doing that. I was really, for selfish reasons, looking to learn, less looking to network. I was just looking to touch them, feel them, know what it's like to have conviction of a project, and that book idea at breakfast at my senior year took me to traveling all across the world, to just meeting some of the brightest young entrepreneurs in the world.
It's amazing, and I think you've got to meet some amazing people. Just as I was reading a little bit about your book and some of the blurbs, the creator of Chuck E. Cheese, Gene Landrum, is one of the people who wrote about your book. Tell me, besides Gene, or including Gene, who are some of the more interesting people that you got the chance to meet and talk with that you sort of never would have thought as a 17, 18, 19-year-old young person you'd get to talk to?
It's so funny. I mean, Gene is great. A lot of these folks come from the exclusive mastermind I was talking about a few minutes ago, where folks pay tens of thousands of dollars, and I was the weird kid in the corner. I got the chance at that event because I had, through the book, or the fake book at that time, network conference organizer, got the chance to interact backstage with Frank Shankwitz, who founded the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Ron Klein, who invented the credit card magnetic strip, Gene Landrum, founder of Chuck E. Cheese. So many unbelievable people. Mila Kunis at some time, down at South by, we were in some really private events. We played beer pong with Malin Ackerman. There were so many great people.
Always the best experiences. Beer pong is always a good way too. It should be like a new
preparation for college at that point. That was unbelievable. But so all these people, when I would have just like a glimpse of time for them, a tiny moment, I would go up to them and I'd say, hey, I'm writing this book. Can I interview can we schedule a call for 2 months from now? I don't really care what it is. And I think, Eric, as you probably know so well, people want to contribute content. People want to be featured. Yep. And it was so easy. It's like a cheat code almost on how to connect with the world's most successful people.
Yeah, I love it. And I think you mentioned a hack that I really love too, that I don't think enough people take advantage of, which is what you described of sort of volunteering or participating in a conference and using that as an excuse to get in the room with people where, if you attend a conference, you may just get to see them. But if you volunteer, you get this sort of access that may be unusual about it. How did you kind of stumble upon that we'll call that another hack that you came up with to meet some of these amazing people?
Yeah, honestly, I learned that one from my older brother. Josh is a politician here in Long Island. And since he was 14, honestly, he was going to really high profile events that are fundraiser dinners that cost $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a plate. And he could never obviously afford that as a child. So he would, he would volunteer. He would go to a golf outing and say, hey, I can't, afford the 10 grand it is to get the tee time, but I'll run the booth at the front. And then maybe I can hang around for the cocktail hour afterwards. I saw him doing that all through his childhood. He still does that all the time if he can't afford it. Now he's getting invited to places, so
right.
Switched a little bit. But I saw that and I was like, wow, if that works. So what I would do is I would say, hey, my first couple of conferences, I'd say, hey, I'd live tweet it for you. So I will come and I'll be that guy who sits in the front row and I'll just tweet what the speakers say.
Amazing.
And it started with live tweeting. Then it moved to, I'll help promote the photography. I partnered with a photographer who goes to really high profile events. And I say, hey, we'll go together and we'll push out the photography. And then it got really big where I was saying, hey, I'll do the strategy for the marketing behind the conference. So I'll do all my work before I get there. And then once I get there, I'll get to enjoy it. So I tried a lot of different things just to get my foot in the door and say, I'm an author. Don't you want another author?
Yeah, of course. That's amazing. And I think, what I love about that too, is that in some ways it creates a different relationship with you and the speakers. You're not sort of the attendee, you're involved in one way or another, and they start to see you differently, which I think is this concept of kind of creating faux credibility in some ways that allows deeper conversations to happen.
Yeah, authority is so tricky, I think, to nail down if you don't take the right steps, but so important in terms of legitimacy and credibility. And owning your space, having a domain of expertise. And I think the book is obviously one of the best things that you can do. And I know that, and so many of your students know that they walk away being an authority, claiming authority in your space. And once I figured out how the authority game works, it was game over. Then I had access to so many more people and more opportunities.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. I think this concept of, I talk about creating your own credibility in some ways. And one of the best ways is through a book or through a podcast or through a video series or a, event. What did you find in some ways? Because you're in some ways engaging with potential clients who are big brands and companies. And here's this guy who doesn't have a college degree. How did you sort of navigate that? And how did you see the book change the conversation as someone who now has created credibility as opposed to borrowing credibility from a degree or some kind of, education credential on your resume?
Yeah. Having the book, even before I published it, just putting author like pending. I think what I would put is it was in 2015. I'd put like author and then I'd do parentheses 2019. I just put it like so far out that people would probably forget at that point. It opened so many more doors because I would get accepted to things. When I would apply to things, once I would have author on, I would get accepted to things. I'd get invited to conferences. People would answer my cold emails. Whereas before, when I would just say, hey, I'm a college student, or hey, I'm a gap year or a high school student, no one would even answer my cold emails. So the authority that the book gave me to open doors and be treated as a legitimate person, a legitimate entrepreneur, was unparalleled. But I did fall into a pretty difficult position of where my authority lied. I was doing, college admissions consulting in high school. I was doing marketing consulting on the side to open doors for me on my gap year. But then the thing that I was really passionate about was youth entrepreneurship, three totally different fields that I wanted to have a strong brand in. So I did find a lot of difficulty in picking a domain and presenting like a coherent authority structure. But the book, I think once I landed on what I wanted, the book was, unbelievable, because now I could claim that I'm one of the leading, authorities, one of the most credible people when it comes to young entrepreneurship. And the book really helps that stand up.
Yeah, I was going to dive into that a little bit. I think this and this really great profile and the USA Today of you. It does in some ways, it kind of says something that I thought was a little bit potentially counter to this concept of authority. A little bit of saying like, he started 3 businesses as the sort of the outcome, and I think you described that a little bit. That in some ways that's not necessarily a badge of honor, because in some ways it may look like you don't have the depth to really show that. You just sort of you look at that. There's this joke. I grew up in Nebraska. There's this river called the Platte, and it's a mile wide and an inch deep is the joke about it. So sometimes that can be the curse of the entrepreneur. What was the consequence a little bit of that concept of sort of spreading yourself to all of these messages and sort of challenges that you may have seen from that?
Yeah, it's so true, and I could really feel the difficulties that I had back in the day. I would go to a client, a marketing client, and say, "Hey, I'm a marketing expert. I really want to, do this for your event or your brand or your conference," and they'd say, "But Justin, we Googled you and we read these articles that you're helping kids get into college. Are you still doing that? Or are you doing this?" It was really confusing, and I think weakened the credibility that I was trying to build. So I would try to manipulate the brand. I would say, "Oh, I got my start marketing kids to colleges. So that opened my eyes to marketing, which is what I want to do now for your brand." So I would try to paint a really coherent picture using the different tools, but it was pretty hard at some times. And I'm pretty good with words, but it definitely was tricky to do. So eventually, I took a big step back at the end of my gap year, and I decided on the one project I did want to pursue, which was NextGen and the book, which were very, very much aligned. And I gave up my last, marketing client, my last, college admissions client, to really focus, because I realized that at the end of the day, people don't want, a jack of all trades, a master of none. And to be really successful, you have to be hyper focused on, you have to have conviction on an idea, on a project. So the book and my project NextGen are completely aligned. Those were the last two standing.
Yeah. And I think you hit on it. And I think in some ways, what I think is a really important thing is to create a book does require you to take a stand and provide depth in order to pull these pieces together. And that sort of journey, even of what at the time was a fake book for you, probably forced you to say, what do I really care about? Because, having a book that's a mile wide and an inch deep doesn't mean a lot.
That's the hardest thing. I'm sure that your students, get the benefit from. It's being forced for one of the first times in your life to take a stance on an issue. I mean, how many times, when you're growing up, you could waffle between ideas left and right. But when you're writing a book, you have to choose. You have to have some type of mission or statement that you're trying to make a case for throughout the book. And it's what a wonderful exercise in logic and reason and persuasion. But I think it's really hard if you don't have conviction, if you're not sure. So the book was great on kind of making a stance for what I believe in, and it still serves. And things have changed, since I published it. Actually, about 2 years from last week. Things have changed. I definitely have updated thoughts and everything, but the core concepts stand. The foundation of what I said then, I still believe now. Yep. And I'm really excited, by that length.
Yeah, and you I think there's the line that I love from even the sort of introductory statement is you describe this as designing the life that you want. And I think this is empowerment. I think there's something powerful about this concept, and you talk a lot of the book about this sort of entrepreneurial mindset versus being an entrepreneur, and there's some research that shows that particularly millennials see the word entrepreneur as describing a mindset as opposed to a class of business ownership. So how have you seen that play out in your own journey as this entrepreneurial mindset versus, hey, I have to start a company?
Yeah, I think that while I first had intended to write the book to persuade folks to be entrepreneurs, when I went on my gap year and I was meeting these great people, not all of them had started their own company. Mm-hmm. But when I was kind of checking the Rolodex of who are the most talented people, the most ambitious people, the most well-networked people in the network that I've spoken to, is reading their interview transcripts. They were all taking similar actions, even though they were in different positions. And I walked over the term intrapreneur that I never really heard before. And there were folks that were creating opportunities or solving problems, even within a larger ecosystem. So folks who were doing things differently as part of large companies, as part of teaching institutions, some great professors out there who are just approaching teaching differently. And honestly, Eric, your research on companies who are creating entrepreneurs before the folks leave companies, when they're still at these great tech companies or at these big software companies, they're thinking differently. They're starting new projects. They're claiming responsibilities. And I think those are the threads that were really strong and what I wanted to carry over into NextGen, and that you don't have to start your own company to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to, go raise venture capital to be an entrepreneur. You can be in your own company right now. You could be a student right now, but you can have this mindset that opportunities are created, problems have to be solved. How can I align and mobilize resources to achieve those goals? And I really do think it's a mindset. And I think any author who's, taken a book from start to finish, they are an entrepreneur because they have to create something from scratch, have conviction, an idea, mobilize the resources they need. And authorship is one of the greatest experiments, in my opinion, that you could have in entrepreneurship.
I agree. Certainly agree. It challenges you to think. And what I've found is coming as, I'd written a book when I was younger, and then now as sort of thinking and teaching about entrepreneurship, the similarities when you really you deconstruct writing a book and launching a company or that early phase is almost identical. And I think if you remove the concept of writing per se from this thought of what we think about writing a book, instead of, I call it creating a book, you'll find that the underlying premises are almost identical.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you studied, Eric, your students or authors in general who have gone on a year or two after they've written the book, they're using some of the same philosophies, approaches, tools, techniques that they wrote the book in their personal lives and in their professional careers. And that's probably the most fantastic thing I think that comes from writing a book. You view the world differently. Yeah. You can analyze credibility and authority. You can look at resource alignment. You can look at logic and making an argument so differently after you've done it yourself.
Yeah. So I have one more question about the book, and then I want to talk about NextGen, which I think is also sort of, as you said, this focusing function that has sort of changed your college experience and now even beyond. Talk to me about your decision to many people view books as, oh gosh, you're going to make a best-selling book and make tons of money. You took a decidedly different approach to what the book would give you, and decided to donate the proceeds of the book to sort of a foundation that is involved in scholarship funds. Tell me about your decision making and the process of thinking about the book not as a money tool, but as a way to generate benefit for others.
Yeah. So when I got to starting, actually writing the book, I had thought about my goals. And I've been outlining this book. I've been making notes for years. Ever since high school, I was calling these people, I was making these notes. So it wasn't until, later in my gap year that I took all of this, knowledge that I had and aligned it into a philosophy, into a book, and into a statement. And when I was doing that, I was thinking about what are my goals for this book? I want to inspire. That was probably the biggest one. I really wanted to, have an alternate route available for others. So that was probably the one that trumped everyone else. But longer down the list, I wanted to build authority. I wanted to have authority in my space. I really love to speak to audiences, and I knew having a book would help me speak. Also, get paid to speak, which is something I was interested in doing. And then longer down that list, probably at the very bottom was make money from the book. When I was researching authors, I was talking to authors. I said, hey, how much money do you make from your book? I was pretty blunt in asking. And Greg Reed, who is a mentor of mine, who runs this mastermind that I went to with all these great people, he makes $2 million in a weekend from this mastermind. He said last month he had 17 cents of book income. And he said, anyone who thinks that, just you're going to make $1 million by writing a book, you're dreaming. I was like, yeah, wow, I had no idea. He said the book is a tool for your life, and is not necessarily a tool for income. And that really stuck with me. So I decided if I'm, at the end of the day, I want the book as a tool to inspire, to build credibility, to speak. I don't need the book as a tool to make money. So why don't I, add a fun twist to it? Dylan and I had talked about, Dylan, my co-founder, had talked with me about, giving scholarships to kids who wanted to pursue a business but still go to college, something that's really difficult to do nowadays. So we said, why don't we find a bunch of the smartest ones and support them? So we gave scholarships using the proceeds of the book launch and some other monies that we had raised to give scholarships to kids who wanted to pursue entrepreneurship in college. And it was really, really exciting and one of the most rewarding times. I could say the 2 months from pre-launch, announcing the publication of the book, doing a book launch with friends and family, and then donating the proceeds. What a rewarding time it was for me, and one of the most memorable of my entire life.
That's amazing. It's great. I would tell you, to your point, the choice of deciding to donate in some ways changes the dynamic with your audience. My first book, I didn't donate the proceeds, not because I in some ways it wasn't enough money to matter, but I didn't even know that that was a thing. And the second book, I decided to donate it to two nonprofits that I care a lot about, Startup Weekend.
Oh, no way. Anyone's in particular?
Yeah, Startup Weekend and Kiva were the two that I donated the proceeds to. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Both my books were about aspects of entrepreneurship, and I had about 5x more sales from the second book than the first. And the books were largely, the same audiences and in some ways those things. But it was interesting to see that change of the discussion from people really changed the way that they viewed the book, as opposed to people in their mind see books as, oh, this is like a way to make money. But when you remove that off the table, they then see about supporting you and the cause and other things.
Yeah. And honestly, I think the book is an extension of you. And when people go out, especially close friends, family, and colleagues, they go out and buy it. What a mentor said to me is they should be able to hear your voice. They should be able to hear that this is Eric talking. This is Justin talking. That this is not some astute author, in their grand library. This is a real person, kind of just showing you what they've researched and what they found. And I think the more authentic you can be, the better. And that was a theme that I tried to stay consistent with. I wanted to be as vulnerable and authentic as possible.
It's amazing. And so I want to take to in some ways the decision that you made that has changed your college career and even after is to start a business, a focused business that aligns the book, NextGen. Why don't you talk a little bit about what was the original inspiration for creating NextGen, which for those of you who are just learning about it is an amazing sort of started as a summit that collected amazing young people together to think about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial mindsets, and today has become much more of a global brand and ongoing activity. Tell me a little bit about what drew you to starting a conference.
Thank you for those kind words, Eric. My goals back in high school I wanted to rub shoulders with really brilliant people to inspire myself were the same goals that I had when we were starting NextGen. The same goals I had for the book. I wanted to surround myself with brilliant people So when I was interviewing these people, I was going to these conferences, I would just go to a city and I'd just ask friends and contacts to who are the brightest young people in the city, who are the brightest young founders that you know. I was meeting all these people, I was doing all this research, I was interviewing for the book, and I realized that wouldn't it be unbelievable if I could just take everyone I was interviewing, lock the doors in a room for a week and just talk to them, just hang out with them, just live with them. And I started romanticizing that idea of literally just like locking the doors, getting everyone in a room and just hanging out and collaborating. There's something so inspiring about that to me. And I was going to other conferences looking for that opportunity, but so many conferences, number one, are horrible, and number two, are geared towards I think really different audiences and are geared towards business card swapping and not relationship building. And that was such a problem, such a tangible issue. And so many college students who I know would love the opportunity to really rub shoulders and hang out and talk and collaborate with other brilliant young people, but they're not given it anywhere. So Dylan and I said, if it's not out there, but this is something we want, let's go build it ourselves. So we hosted the first NextGen Summit in July of 2015, about 6 months before the book. But with a lot of the research from the book already had been done. It was unbelievable. But to be honest, after the conference, closed, I vividly remember I turned to Dylan and I was like, so what'd you think? He's like, oh, I think it went pretty well. I was like, yeah, I think it went pretty well too. I think it was, we definitely thought it was good for sure. But then we had this Facebook group that we had used to have roommates, find each other during the weekend. And all of a sudden these posts started trickling in the Facebook group. This weekend changed my life. I had found my co-founder who I'm now, 110% in on working on this business. Or, this weekend saved me from a path that I was going down that I was scared, but I never had the fortitude to say, I don't want that. I want this. Or, I found my boyfriend here and all these amazing stories like flooding our Facebook group. So we're like, all right, we maybe have something here. And that roommate pairing Facebook group turned into a global community of young entrepreneurs that still are trying to build today.
That's amazing. And you're to your point, this was okay has turned out to be, sort of lavishly heaped praise from publications like Forbes and others. What people may not realize is you're still in college and you're starting this, you've run this business now that has, thousands of people that are involved in attending it. How has that experience been to sort of be growing a business and a brand while as still a college student?
Yeah, I mean, running a business while in college has been the most rewarding experience I could ever imagine. I get truly the best of both worlds. I get to, work on the thing that I'm most passionate about now, the thing that I believe is an extension of myself, the thing that I'm most aligned with, the thing that I think has the largest impact, that also, has the ability to produce, large monetary gains. I found a project that's really perfect for me that I get to go in on. But at the end of the day, still do it in a safe environment where I'm surrounded by peers and friends and professors who are challenging me and encouraging me to grow personally. So I really get that balance. I think, there's a debate at every NGS. We do a panel on, should you go to college or not? Every NGS, we have the panel. And people ask me, Justin, what's your opinion? I say, it's a really personal choice, and I will never prescribe my mentality to everyone. But what I will say in defense of college is that there's a lot of personal growth that happens outside of the classroom, but as a byproduct of being, at college, that I think maybe some dropouts miss out on. So that personal growth is something I'm really grateful for. But not to say that it's all glitter. It's really hard to be a collegiate entrepreneur. My grades are not fantastic. My time is spread really, really thin. And when it comes to authority, sometimes there is an authority needle in my side saying, "Hey, Justin, how can you really be an authority on youth entrepreneurship and community building if you're still in school yourself?" So there are some negatives, but the positives not even close. Trumped everything else.
we all deal with the imposter syndrome. I think there was a recent statistic I read that said 70% of people suffer from the imposter syndrome. And my response to that was, and 30% of people lie about it.
That's true.
I mean, I think it's really a challenging thing to reconcile these, to sort of say, how can I be an expert at 19, 20, 21, 22, 45, whatever those, whatever age is, to do those sorts of things, which I think is, I think it's a lot of people don't recognize that even though people seem like they have it figured out, we all are wrestling with our own levels of insecurities and imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And even the experts that we look up to the most, that we read their books and we say, wow, I wish I had this person's level of knowledge or conviction or intelligence. They themselves are also struggling with that, Eric. Right. And it's so funny that you bring that up. And, I'll bring it back to the book. Authorities claimed, authorities built. And everyone has doubts, and everyone is trying to figure it out. And I think being honest is a great tool. I'm trying to be more honest about the struggles of being a collegiate entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for sure when a lot of folks are counting on you. And now we have a team. So it's definitely challenging, but incredibly rewarding.
And so tell a little bit. You went back to the beginning and said you had this even before you started your gap year. Your plan was, I'm going to go be a Wall Street investment banker type of thing. And now you've in some ways created your career. Talk about you'll be graduating here soon. What's the sort of how has this changed your career trajectory now as you see yourself?
Yeah, so it's funny. So Dylan just finished his last class at Duke. So he's going full-time on NextGen. I still have a little bit of time left. I got a year and change until I graduate, but I work a full-time schedule on NextGen. So we have our career. We have a team now that we've hired. We've raised some money. So we have a full team that is in place to bring NextGen to life and turn it into a really powerful community, global community of young entrepreneurs. The thing that is really weird for me is my mission has changed. I think at the very beginning, when I was starting NextGen, I wanted to curate the world's talent. I think that was like a really good tagline that sounded sexy and stuck in my head. Now I think it's much more evolved into build the world's community. My values have changed. My missions have changed to where I now want to just have people have each other's back. That's right. The new tagline I want, like have someone else's back. So it's really exciting. NextGen is the project that I will be spending, I hope, the next couple of years on, for sure, but hopefully longer than that too. It's an extension of myself. So we're doing our best, and every day just waking up and trying to deliver a community experience to a couple thousand young entrepreneurs.
It's amazing. And your next one is coming up in June. Why don't you hopefully there's I think I've encouraged all my students to actually attend. Tell a little bit about, give a little quick high level commercial. I'm sure as it's even fleshing out together today now, several months ahead, give a little pitch of who benefits from this, and what's some of the neat experiences that you've seen in the past and we'll see in the future from.
Yeah, and Eric, your students are unbelievable, and we love working, with having a couple of your students join us last year at NGS, and hopefully have more back this year. It's unbelievable to have them join us. NextGen Summit is the number one, no competition, hands down, don't even joke. Conference and summit for young entrepreneurs. The thread is talent of what we're looking for. So whether you're, a freshman at Georgetown who has an idea for an app but has not taken the first step, or you're a 26-year-old founder who's raised a $30 million Series A. If you're ambitious, if you're talented, if you are hungry, and if you're willing to embrace the concept of community, the concept of people from all across the world, from different backgrounds coming together to support each other, to collaborate, not compete, to say, I have your back, then we're looking for you. So NextGen Summit brings together the world's brightest young people from across the world and connects them with the resources that they're looking to be successful. So whether it's funding, whether it's mentorship, whether it's manufacturer or vendor relationships or press, you come to NGS and we have it all. It is an incredibly supportive group that feels much more like a family than it does a network or a conference. It's the 3 most fun days of my calendar year. We get some big names down. Last year had some unbelievable speakers, from Tobias Harris, who plays in the Detroit Pistons, to Brandon Steiner, who runs the world's largest sports memorabilia company, to Cindy Whitehead, who sold her $1 billion drug to Valiant and then got it sold back to her for a $20 million profit on top of the $1 billion acquisition. We have some unbelievable speakers who stay the whole weekend to mentor, to work with young entrepreneurs. And we'd love to have you there.
That's amazing. And just to give you a quick story, I'm sure you don't always get the details of how this changes people's trajectories. One of my students that I sent, so I have a couple, but one went and just published her book. Her name's Antonia Liu. She published a book called Hack College Like an Entrepreneur. And she was like you, oftentimes having this pressure of very entrepreneurial, wants to start a company and has this pressure of dropping out. And so she interviewed some of the best entrepreneurs who didn't drop out and figured out how they approached college. So her book is out. I'll send you a copy. You'll love it. It's sort of right up your aspect of how do you actually think about. Yeah, it's great, and I think it's really appropriate with your story and your audience. But the other one that I think is a great story is I would say someone who was very much in that aspirational entrepreneur camp, a young man named Franklin Lee, who was, when I met him, a graduate student at Georgetown pursuing a advanced degree in anthropology and sociology, and had this dream of one day being an entrepreneur, and has had a problem being in graduate school of never having enough sleep. So he wrote a book called The Art of Napping that came out.
Yeah, The Art of Napping. Of course, I remember. Franklin,
now he credits that weekend experience with helping him really centralize on starting a business. And so he's now starting a business all around the concept of integrating kind of napping and virtual reality to create virtual reality bedrooms and nap pods in the future. And so he said that experience of being around other people and kind of coming away with the impression that it's not something you need to do, in the future, not someday. Why not start now? Was his experience. And, like anyone, he's wrestling and struggling and trying to figure out his own way through it. But I think to your point, community of having other people who are just slightly crazy, like yourself, around you is really powerful. And so anyway, you should, it's sort of neat to hear his story. And he credits, very vividly that moment of how that clarity he got, and also a way that he was able to take that experience and communicate to who has now become his co-founder, Peter, who's helping him launch some really crazy virtual reality exhibits, showcasing what this would look like in the future in New York City in the summer and fall. So anyway, cool to see.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Huge shout out to Franklin. The great part of Franklin's story is that it's a pretty controversial idea that he had, this importance of sleep, this importance of napping that others maybe would dismiss, but he, did the research. He, found something that he really aligned with, and he, put his resources in place and went after it. And what an awesome and wonderful story of another young person who's truly trailblazing. So huge shout out to Franklin and Peter. I'd love to connect with, and just that warms my heart. Yeah. So thanks for sharing.
Of course. It's I think it's the power of community cannot be understated, and I think your story is an interesting one. I think that if I had to summarize a little bit of your adventure in the gap year, you started to really gather people, and even the book accelerated that process of gathering people around you, and you've now in some ways turned it around to sort of gather more people around the people you've gathered, right? So you've always been building a community for the last 5 years, and I think it's neat to see it becoming not only a part of your story, but kind of the central tenet of your story, which really is it's amazing and awesome to see.
Well, thanks so much, Eric. And I realize not only is it, helps you achieve your goals faster by having people around, but it's also a hell of a lot more fun. So I'm intrinsically motivated to continue doing what I'm doing.
That's awesome. So I have a couple of quick rapid fire last things for you. So one thing that I love to do on these is to have you read mean book reviews that someone has left for you. But I have to say, your book has over 30 reviews, and 100% of them are positive. So that throws out the window. I'm no luck there.
I'm honestly glad. I'm not sure if I would have loved to start my day with that, but what a great exercise. Honestly, so but the ego is still at full throttle.
Still at full throttle. It's good, right? I think that's I always find my young authors are always a little nervous about feedback, and I tell them, listen, having negative feedback just means someone actually reads what you write. So it's not the worst thing ever, for sure, which is good. One person I would put on your radar to talk to is a guy who used to work for me named David Spinks. If you don't know David, He's the founder of CMX, the community manager group. And I think he in some ways has been trying to think about this concept of the community manager, community builder for a while. And it was early, that process, even when I first met him 6 or 7 years ago. And I think has realized just the importance of community. And as the internet has been a convening force, in some ways it's also been a dividing force. And so he's now really trying to help people think about building community. So as you continue on this quest to have people's backs and build community, he's a great guy. He'd be someone even good to, not to plug the conference, but he'd be someone great to in some ways involve, because he's both an entrepreneur and bootstrapping a business, but really dedicated to this power of community.
Yeah, Eric, no, I appreciate the shout out. We'll be sure to kind of check them out.
Yeah, it's great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the time. And, I'm excited to hear about your adventures in Southeast Asia. My big plug is make sure you go to Bagan in Myanmar while on a weekend adventure. Most amazing place one of the most amazing places I've ever been, thousands of temples, and it's kind of still off the beaten path a little bit. If you get a chance to take a hot air balloon ride and see it, it's pretty amazing. So that's my plug.
Wow, I don't know how anything could possibly beat what you just said. So it'll be on my priority list. Eric, thanks so much for having me here, and just for always, I think, looking to help the next generation and lift them up to where you're at now. It's incredibly inspiring, and the work you're doing is beyond impactful. So thank you for having me. And looking forward to more work together.
Absolutely, and for everyone here, check out the book that Justin wrote on his gap year, What Wakes You Up, Designing Kick-Ass Lives, and also take a chance to check out the NextGen community and attend in person this June. The website is ngsummit.com. It's an amazing community, and I think every week there's or more than that, there's some kind of a live webinar. There's some kind of discussions. One of the most active Facebook groups I've been a part of, and I think you do a really great job curating that community. But again, thanks Justin for the time, and hopefully we can chat at some point as you start to develop that next book. I'm thinking now that now that we've talked about it, you've said it out loud, suddenly the clock starts counting on down, and you're going to start working on this.
Look what you've done here, Eric. Well, I'm gonna hold you to it once I get the hands on what you're up to next as well. So we'll be accountability partners on that.
I love it. All right, man. Good to talk, and thanks again for the time.
Thanks, Eric.